Welcome to Hope is Here. My name is Greg Horn, and we are continuing our series on Mondays and Tuesdays called Soul Detox. And we've been looking at things that just kind of contaminate our souls. We live in just a shock-proof world where we must fight the soul pollution that threatens our health, our faith, and our witness to others. Without even knowing it, sometimes we just willingly inhale secondhand toxins, poisoning our relationship with God and stunning our spiritual growth. In this series, Soul Detox, we've been examining the toxins that assault us daily, such as toxic influences, toxic thoughts, toxic emotions, toxic behaviors, and today we're going to be looking at toxic relationships. We've been looking at 2 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 1 as kind of our foundational verse for this series. It says, "Let us purify ourselves from everything that contaminates body and spirit, and perfecting holiness out of reverence for God." And here's the thing that we've been talking about, friends, over the past 4 weeks on Mondays and Tuesdays, that God wants to remove what contaminates your soul so you can live in holiness and freedom. We've also been looking at Jeremiah chapter 30, verse 17 as another verse that it's just been my prayer as people have been listening to this series or watching on our YouTube channel. Jeremiah chapter 30, verse 17 says, "I will restore you to health and heal your wounds, declares the Lord." Friends, I want to remind you that God is in the restoration business. There's a lot of those restoration programs. People flip houses and remodel their homes, and there's programs on people how they restore cars. And yet, friends, God restores our heart, and He heals those wounds that happen just from living in a fallen world. And sometimes I get discouraged, but I have to be reminded this is not our home. In this side of heaven, we will get discouraged. We will get dismayed. But Jesus has said, "Take heart, I have overcome the world." In this world, you will have trials and tribulations, but in me, you will have peace. And that's the whole goal of this Soul Detox series, is to help get our minds and hearts and souls decluttered and get some restoration and healing so that we can be all that God has called us to be as we live here on this earth. And so I got to ask you today, would you be willing to give God permission to do that, to maybe heal a wound in your heart and mind today? I hope you will, because I know He wants to do it. And I've seen Him do it in my life several times, and so many others over the years. So many wonderful guests that we've been blessed to have on Hope is Here, sharing their stories of restoration and healing. Well, today I want us to look at, let me recap real quick. If toxic influences, we've learned that with toxic influences, that if we want a clean soul, we have to filter what we let in. I mean, Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23 always is one of my go-to verses that I need to be reminded of quite often. It says, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything that you do flows from it." Oh, friends, we got to be so intentional about that and know that God wants to heal us, but we have to be intentional about protecting our hearts. And we only have one, and yet that starts with what we watch, the things we read, the things we see. And so I want to encourage you to do that. Today we're going to be looking at toxic relationships and setting healthy boundaries. And one of the things I'm hoping I can do is kind of change your mindset about boundaries. I know sometimes we hear that word boundaries, we almost consider it like a 4-letter word. We don't want anybody telling us what to do or, having boundaries. And yet, friends, I'm learning my 60th year of life here on this earth that boundaries don't actually push people away. They protect what God is doing in your life. Say that again. Boundaries don't push people away. They protect what God is doing in your life. Lisa TerKeurst says it this way: healthy boundaries are not only a good idea, they're God's idea. So be encouraged by that today, friends. And I really didn't plan on this originally when I was going to do this talk about toxic relationships and setting healthy boundaries. But I just really felt strongly in my spirit that I need to talk about boundaries. And man, there was a wonderful book written several years ago called Boundaries. And Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend wrote it, and it's been over 20 years ago, and it's actually been revised and reprinted a few years ago because over 500,000 copies have been bought. It's been updated, but man, I just think it's one of those books we all need to read, and it's one of the most widely read self-help Christian books that just centers on how to say yes and when to say no, but to do those in healthy ways. And so I want to share 7 takeaways from that book. We'll probably get just through these today, and then we're going to jump in about how we can examine what toxic relationships are and how we can detox our soul in those unhealthy toxic relationships. But let's look at a little bit more about what boundaries are from Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend, their wonderful book called Boundaries. The first thing is boundaries define what you are responsible for. Boundaries define what you are responsible for. A boundary is like a property line around your life. You are responsible for yourself, your feelings, your attitudes, your behaviors, your choices, your values, and your limits, not for controlling others. Friends, that's so huge. You are responsible for yourself, but you're not responsible for controlling others' behaviors. That's on them. You are responsible to how you respond to others, whether you're loving, kind, and helpful, but you're not responsible for other people's actions and carrying their responsibilities. And full transparency here today, friends, I've been guilty of doing that. I've been guilty of that. And we're not responsible, friends, for carrying other people's responsibilities. A second thing about boundaries is saying no is actually healthy and biblical. Wow, you're like, oh my goodness, Greg. Did I hear you right? Yes, friends, saying no is healthy and biblical. Here's what I know, friends. Many people feel guilty saying no, but it's necessary for healthy relationships, friends. Okay? To be healthy, sometimes you got to say no. Maybe your soul is not healthy today because you are like me, struggling with being a people pleaser and say yes to so many things. And it doesn't mean some of them aren't God honoring, but the problem is you get exhausted. And trust me, friends, I know, I understand, I get it. I really didn't want to do this program today because I need to hear these things. And friends, I want to remind you, even Jesus said no at times, withdrawing from people to pray or refusing some of the demands, okay? He didn't heal everybody. I mean, so many people wanted to get with him, but there was only so much he could do. He did what God called him to do. But here's what I know, friends. A clear no allows your yes to mean something real. And I heard somebody say this recently. I would like to give them credit. I can't remember. But every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. Let's share that again. Every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. And so saying no is healthy, and it is also biblical. A third thing about boundaries, they protect your freedom and growth. They protect your freedom and growth. Without them, many people manipulate, control, or overstep boundaries in our lives. With boundaries, you can freely give your love, your time, and service rather than doing it out of guilt or compulsion. Boundaries also help you prevent burnout, resentment, and unhealthy dependency. And that's why, friends, I'm a recovering people pleaser. I'm doing better with putting boundaries in and being able to say no. And, friends, it's not about what you say, it's how you say it. And I've just had to learn to say sometimes, I get offered an opportunities for so many good things, but just say, I really appreciate you asking me, but unfortunately I can't do that right now, but maybe ask me again in the future. And so maybe for some of you today, you're like, Greg, I need to start applying that in my life and putting boundaries with not saying yes to everything. Another thing I think, friends, where we put boundaries about saying no is that sometimes we'll say, hey, you know what, I'll commit to something knowing that it's going to be really stressful for me to do that. And then 2 hours before I'm supposed to be somewhere or do something, I just bail out at the last minute because I'm just overcommitted and I'm exhausted. And I've been learning on the front end to try to just say, you know what, man, once again, I'd love to do that, but I'm just already overcommitted that day, or I'm maybe not overcommitted, but that would make me overcommitted. And so I just can't commit to saying yes, and I'd rather be upfront about it than let you down when it gets closer to the event. So, friends, I know that's hard for fellow people pleasers, but really want to encourage you to do that. I've been trying to do a better job of that over the past few years, and it's really been healthy for me. A fourth thing about boundaries is that, and I've found that are common boundary problems, is that compliance, always saying yes to avoid conflict. Oh man, I can relate to that one. You know, a common boundary problem is compliance, always saying yes to avoid conflict. Then you've got avoidance, saying no to the wrong things and also shutting out the right things. Oh my goodness, friends. Also, controllers, ignoring others' boundaries. Oh, we all know people like that. And then you've got non-responsives, failing to hear or respond to the needs of others because we don't have proper boundaries. Then we don't respond to family and friends that really do need our help because we're so overextended without creating boundaries. So, friends, I know that boundaries apply to all areas of our lives: family, friends, work, avoiding overcommitment, standing against misuse, marriage, children, teaching them responsibilities. That's so huge, friends. It's one of those things that I know that I'm thankful I did have parents that did. Their yes meant yes and their no meant no. And yet, as we get out on our own, we got to establish those boundaries ourselves. And then a boundary that we don't like to talk about, didn't have to talk about when we were kids, but for us adults, all right, now is digital life, social media, being online, social media. Oh man, that's one I'm still continuing to tweak about putting boundaries on my digital time. The sixth thing about boundaries is they must be communicated and enforced. People can't respect boundaries that they don't know about, right? I mean, they just don't. So we need to make clear what our boundaries are. But here's what you got to know, friends. When you start to do that, you can expect resistance sometimes, especially from those who benefited from your lack of boundaries. And they may try to push back. So just be prepared, okay? And then boundaries are kept, but not with anger, but with clarity, love, and consistency. Let me say that again. Boundaries are kept, not with anger, but with clarity, love, and consistency. I think that's one of the really important takeaways from that book called Boundaries by Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend. And the seventh and final thing about boundaries I want to share with you from this wonderful book that's going to help you with dealing with toxic relationships is boundaries lead to a healthier and more loving relationships. And friends, that's what I think we all want. We truly do. I really do believe that with everybody that's listening here. So I want you to repeat that with me. Boundaries lead to healthier and more loving relationships because they allow for intimacy without enmeshment and connection with others without control. They also help us make room for real responsibility, forgiveness, and love. So, friends, I hope that, maybe you go back and listen to this program. Maybe you write these down. You may be driving. You might be exercising. You couldn't write down just some of these 7 steps to clarify and know what boundaries are to have healthy relationships. And it'll just ripple over into so many areas of your life. You'll sleep better at night. You'll enjoy life more. And they're ones that I'm trying to implement. And I know that you'll be blessed if you try them. If you've been blessed by this program, I hope you'll share it with somebody else, but I hope you'll join us again tomorrow as we continue our series on soul detox and looking at toxic relationships and how to set healthy boundaries. My name's Greg Horn, and this is Hope is Here.